I spent quite a few months and even I would say years waiting to be ready to start. And I feel like I've learned that waiting for certainty and waiting for confidence and the moment that everything will all click into place and I'll give myself finally permission to move. That moment never came, and something else did. The logic trap. The spreadsheet illusion. I tried to logic my way into certainty. Every plan I made, every conversation with someone who had it figured out, every framework, every model, every person that I asked for advice, none of it moved me closer to actually starting. There's actually a research done on this by UC Santa Barbara. And they did a study on the moment right before you take action. They found something interesting. There's this tiny psychological pause that happens between intention and action. That's where most of us get stuck. We think if we just gather one more piece of information, talk to someone else, learn from another expert, build one more spreadsheet, we'll reach certainty. But here's what the research shows. Certainty isn't waiting for you on the other side of planning. It's waiting on the other side of movement. Why our brains do this makes sense, actually. We're wired to reduce risk. So we gather information first, and of course our brains evolved to avoid danger, and they're very good at sensing potential failure before we move. Too much. But there's a ceiling to planning. And at some point, you just can't plan your way towards starting and momentum. And actually, progress reveals itself only from experience, not from outside looking into it, but actually doing the thing. So the paradox is that the more you plan, the more you realize that you don't know, so you plan more. And every question you answer creates two new ones, and it becomes an infinite. At least that's, in my experience, how it works for me. And I remember it very clearly. I'd finish a plan, I'd think, I'd be like, okay, now I'm ready. And then I feel like something missed, another case, some scenario I hadn't accounted for. So I'd revise and revise and revise again. And that spreadsheet never got perfect and never got to the core of the problem. I was asking it to do something that it can't do. I was asking it to give me certainty. But planning is just data. It's not permission. I should learn from my past because I've launched things feeling like I'm ready maybe 40%. Not a perfect system, not a clear roadmap, just to believe that step by step I'll manage. And it was terrifying, it was messy, but the market teaches you more than any plan can teach you. And I actually learned what mattered. I learned what didn't. I met people who taught me things along the way, and opportunities showed up I never could have planned for. And it's important because there's also research on that. Steven Pressfield calls it resistance. He says resistance is this invisible force that opposes meaningful work. And the interesting part is the more important something is to your soul's evolution, the more resistance you feel. So when you're feeling that paralyzing fear before starting something that matters, that's actually a signal. That's where you should go. That's proof you're at that age of something worth doing. But most people miss that the real information is hidden until you actually move, you take the steps. You can't see the path from sidelines. You can only see from walking it. And people understanding it get a huge advantage because they understand that action creates information, not the other way around. The timing myth. Everyone waits for the right timing. when I have more time, when I have more money, when I have more experience, when things calm down, when I figure it out first. I am so guilty of this. Timing is the most common excuse because it sounds rational, it sounds like prudence. Here's what I notice, that the people who started last year are further ahead than people that are still planning today, and even the ones that started yesterday. And it's not necessarily because they're smarter or because they know more, it's because they use their timing to their advantage. And they perhaps accepted that they would figure it out on the way, and they are. Timing is created the moment you decide to take action. You don't wait for the right moment, you create it by beginning. The moment you start, you step into a different reality. New doors open because you're now inside the system, not outside of it. And you can see opportunities you couldn't see from the planning stage. You meet people who might become your partners, you can learn things that change your direction. None of it happens while you're waiting for the timing to be right. Timing waits for no one. And I think about it a lot, actually. The moment that you decide to take action, you're no longer a bystander, you're the actor. And whatever mechanism you believe in, universe, God, reality, we get rewarded for being actors. We get information, we get feedback, and we get changed by experience. People who wait just waste time, basically. Here's what's tricky about starting. You can't logic yourself into it. Every piece of data in the world won't convince you to start. Every statistic, success story, every framework, none of it creates readiness, because readiness isn't logical. It's not a calculation, it's a belief. It's a belief in your own path, in your own actions. And I know it sounds abstract, but it's actually very practical. What this belief means is simple. It's the faith that once you take a step, the next one will appear and you'll figure things out on the way. Faith that moving is better than waiting. And it's not religious, it's practical. The universe rewards action. Maybe our brain does, because action creates information and waiting creates nothing. Either way, movement is currency. We move and doors open. And I've tested this over and over again. Every time I take an action before I'm even ready, something appears, something changes. It's not about positive thinking. It's about the simple mechanics of how information works. Information about yourself, about your market, about what's possible. And this information only exists from experience. It doesn't exist in overthinking. So the belief has to shift to this one, that the path reveals itself by walking, not by thinking about it, not by planning, but by moving through it. And you don't have to believe in this forever. You just have to believe in the beginning, when it's just the hardest to take the first few steps. Time is obvious, momentum, information. But the most important part that gets me is that something happens when you move towards something that matters to you. You change, you become someone different. You learn, you develop competence, and you also develop a different relationship to yourself. You become someone who acts, who takes action, the identity piece. You don't become a founder, a singer, an artist by planning to be one. You become one by starting. And Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. That's James Clear with Atomic Habits. The inverse is also true. Every moment you wait is a vote for the type of person who waits. And here's what's dangerous about that, and I'm very guilty of that. There's this moment where waiting becomes a habit. And then it can become your identity. I'm the type of person who waits for the right moment, who procrastinates. And once that identity sets in, it can become self-reinforcing. And you believe that you wait, and because you believe that, you wait some more, and the window closes, not because of a deadline, but because identity can harden, habits calcify, and it's difficult then to break it and create healthier habits. And I am that kind of person that has been speaking about starting a business for many years now. And never too late, of course. I regret the time lost. But we are where we are, and we can start today. So how do you actually start? Release the need for perfection. It's easier said than done. But the version doesn't need to be so good. It just needs to exist. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be up to some unrealistic standard. Most important is for the version to exist. You can't iterate on something that doesn't exist. You can't learn from something that you haven't started. So actually, the bar is lower than we think. The bar is just make something exist. Start with what you have, not when you have more resources, more time, more qualification, not when you read one more book or take one more course. Of course, I'm all about learning, but there's a line where you have to stop the research and get practical. And there's something called this tiny habits method, where you don't start with a big goal. Of course, you start ridiculously small. You do one push-up instead of 10. You write one paragraph, not a chapter, not a whole book. And the goal is not to accomplish something big. The goal is to create the belief that you can actually take action and create something. And once you move, momentum follows. And that momentum creates information. And that information creates direction, the belief shift. The only thing standing between you and what you're trying to build is the belief that the path reveals itself. Not the belief that you'll succeed, not the belief that it will be easy, just the belief that the path reveals itself. Decide that belief is true, not because you can prove it, because you can't, but because you're willing to test it, to make it as an experiment. And it's actually simple. You just have to decide that you're going to start before you're ready. You're going to take action. You're going to move before you have all the answers. You're going to begin with what you have. And you're going to trust that once you take the first step, the other one will appear, and then another one. One action today, not someday, not when you're ready, not when the timing is right. Today. And this is actually the biggest reminder for myself, because I am absolutely guilty of delaying things, of procrastinating, of researching and planning and overthinking. And I've had enough. I just want to start and take the steps towards what I want to build. If this video resonated with you, please leave comments and maybe share your tips on this really interesting and messy journey of starting something new.
Your readiness isn't waiting for you somewhere in the future. You're waiting for you right now, in this very moment. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing. Willing to move before you feel ready. Willing to launch before it's perfect. Willing to believe. Willing to start.